So before I start this video, I've realised a lot of people on YouTube don't understand the concept of a thought experiment. This video isn't saying that Ten Hag should deploy Sancho or any other player in whatever specific tactical role I talk about. It's just me coming up with unusual and creative tactical ideas. But before I go any further, let me tell you some exciting news from today's sponsor, OneFootball. Where if you are in the UK or Ireland, you can watch one Serie A game each week on a Saturday, completely free by downloading the OneFootball app. The live game a few weeks ago was Lazio v Napoli, which was a fantastic game, one of the best games I've watched this season. Last weekend it was Sampdoria v AC Milan, and this weekend it's Torino v Sassuolo. You can also watch highlights from a number of different leagues across the world, and you can also keep up to date with any breaking news and live scores. By downloading the OneFootball app, you will be helping to support the channel, so I'll leave it linked in the description below. So after a fantastic display not only against Liverpool but also against Leicester, it seems like Jadon Sancho may now be on course to return to his Borussia Dortmund form. Now sometimes I do like to sit around and just think of different players who could convert into different positions or tactical roles, and Jadon Sancho is always a player I thought could revolutionise the right wing back position. See, I think a lot of people hear the proposal of shifting an attacker into what on the surface would be a defensive position and immediately dismiss it, saying it would stifle their offensive output. However, what you have to remember is that by moving Jadon Sancho from an attacking position to a deeper role, you are now able to get another attacking player on the pitch, and I'll come on to this later on in the video. Jadon Sancho is a player who could be regarded as either a natural winger or even a wide playmaker, in the sense that he can hold his width in the system, or he could even be asked to drift between the lines and look to pick up the ball before creating. I prefer him as a natural winger, but unlike players like Alan Saint-Maximin, Anthony, Riyad Mahrez or Kingsley Coman, Sancho is a wide attacker who could play more as a wide playmaker, drifting in field between the lines of the opposition system, meaning that he is a very versatile player, and so we can judge his effectiveness in a few different roles. But in the modern game, managers are always looking for an advantage, and this can come in the form of converting attacking players into more conventionally defensive positions. And given the attacking responsibility that most fullbacks and wingbacks have in the modern game, that seems like an ideal position to try to convert a more naturally offensive player into. We saw Antonio Conte do this with Victor Moses at Chelsea and Ivan Perisic at Inter Milan. Alphonso Davies at Bayern Munich is an even more successful example of going from a fairly promising young left winger to arguably the best left back in world football. And I believe that in the right system with the right tactical instructions, we could see Jadon Sancho successfully deployed in the right wing back role, in a back five, or at least in a role that resembles that. I think in certain games where Ten Hag's side are going to be forced to defend deep in their own half for the majority of the game, or even just in the second half or last 30 minutes of a game when Ten Hag sees it as being appropriate, United could use a 5-4-1 defensive system with Jadon Sancho in a conventional right wing back position and a more natural fullback like Malacia or Shaw as the left wing back on the other side. This is because I think it would still allow United to use Sancho as a right wing back, but if there were certain phases of play where Sancho had to push higher up from that position, the back line can shift across and Malacia can comfortably play in the left back spot from a positional point of view, whereas if you had someone like Elanga who is a natural winger as the other wing back to Sancho, maybe United would see problems with Elanga positionally, because in a back five your positional play as a wing back doesn't have to be as good as it does if you're playing as a left back in a back four. But this isn't a recent tactical idea, and we can go back almost 60 years to see where I got the inspiration for this type of system. Hilario Herrera joined Inter Milan in 1960 from Barcelona, bringing with him the central midfield playmaker Luis Suarez, who had won the European Footballer of the Year that same year for his part in Barcelona's La Liga and UEFA Cup double. Herrera would transform Inter Milan into one of the greatest teams in Italy and Europe. He modified a 5-3-2 tactic known as Catenaccio, which created a greater flexibility for counterattacks. The so-called Veru tactic was originally created by Austrian coach Karl Rappen, whose Servette team of the 1930s played with 4 fixed defenders, playing a strict man-to-man marking system, with one of those defenders being positioned just ahead of the goalkeeper as the sweeper. Herrera modified the tactic by assigning 4 man marking defenders to the opposition attackers, while an extra player was deployed as a sweeper behind to pick up the loose balls. Armando Pichi would be used as a sweeper behind the 4-man defensive line. However, on the right side, Jair, the Inter Milan Brazilian right winger, was being used more as a hybrid between a wing back and a winger, the role that I've set out for Jadon Sancho in Ten Hag's back five. Whilst for Marchetti at left wing back now also had a defensive security behind him with 3 other defenders, allowing him to push further forward, and now Inter Milan had both him and Jair producing incredible attacking output from the flanks. Herrera's Inter Milan was incredibly successful with this rejuvenated Catenaccio system that was often described as anti-football by the Italian press, because not only did Herrera's side defend deep and compact in a 5-3-2 defensive shape, but they also looked to move the attack forward as quickly as possible, ideally into a shooting position within 3 passes, with Herrera once stating that the ball moves quicker without a player behind it, which definitely translates to a modern day counter-attacking style, something that we've seen United do incredibly successfully already this season, with the goals against Leicester and Liverpool perfect examples of this, and therefore this type of 5 at the back system resembling Herrera's Catenaccio approach could be something that Ten Hag deploys in big matches or during certain phases of a game. Now, as I've said before, Herrera wasn't the inventor of Catenaccio, as without doubt he drew influence from the Austrian coach Karl Rappen and his Swiss team Grasshoppers in the 1930s and 40s, as well as Italian coach Giuseppe Viani and his Salernitana side in the 1940s as well. However, Herrera definitely popularised the style of play, and his Inter Milan side had huge success with it, winning 3 Serie A titles in 4 years between 1962 and 1966, as well as back-to-back European Cups in 64 and 65, as well as the Intercontinental Cup in those 2 seasons as well. Translating this to Manchester United, Ten Hag would obviously not adopt everything in Helanio Herrera's system, as this Manchester United side has a much more offensive style in general, but the use of wing-backs is definitely something I could see Ten Hag applying, particularly with Sancho playing a similar role to the one Jair did in that Inter side. While Sancho would still be expected to get back and hold a wide position in a back 5, in the middle and defensive third, when United don't have the ball, he can be given more offensive freedom to push further forward down the right and even make runs in behind the back line, as United could easily shuffle to a back 4 if Sancho was caught high up the pitch if there was a turnover and the opposition countered quickly. This is why I compare Sancho's role in this hypothetical Manchester United system to the one Jair played for Helanio Herrera's Inter Milan, as like the Brazilian, Sancho would very much be a right wing back focused on attacking first and defence second, with Malacia on the other side being more of a conventional conservative left wing back, providing the defensive solidity and security that Ten Hag could do with in certain situations. If Ten Hag wanted to use a back 5 for whatever situation and decided to go with say Dalot and Malacia as wing backs, he would essentially be sacrificing an attacking player for a more secure defensive shape. However, by using an attacker like Sancho in one of the wing back positions, Ten Hag is now able to use as many attacking players on the field as he would in a conventional 4-2-3-1. For example, using Sancho and Malacia as wing backs, holding the advanced width in the system, with the back 3 of Lisandro Martinez and Lindelof either side of Varane, behind Casemiro and Eriksen playing as a deep double pivot in possession, with Fernandes moving into a central position between the lines, Ronaldo as a centre forward, and Rashford playing more as a wide left forward as well, pulling out wide when Malacia is deeper on the flank, but moving into a central goal scoring position when the ball is in the final third. This means that Ten Hag would still have Sancho, Fernandes, Rashford and Ronaldo as 4 primary attackers on the pitch, the same as in the 4-2-3-1, just now using a more defensively secure 5-3-2 or 5-4-1 out of possession. Now the obvious concern is, would Jadon Sancho be good enough defensively from a positional point of view and when defending in 1v1s to not be a liability without the ball? And that is a fair question. However, I do think attacking players under the right manager and in the right system can develop these attributes and excel in these type of roles, and because he'll be used as a wing back in a back 5, he'll have far less defensive responsibility than a right back in a back 4. We did see Julian Nagelsmann use both Kingsley Coman and Leroy Sané as wing-backs in a 3-4-2-1 system against Unai Emery's Villarreal in the Champions League quarter-finals last season, with a back 3 of Pavard and Lucas Hernandez, who are 2 versatile centre-backs who can also play very comfortably and almost naturally at full-back as well, either side of Upamecano, with a double pivot of Kimmich and Goretzka sitting in front. Nagelsmann has also used Alphonso Davies as one of the wing-backs at times as well, meaning that with Pavard as a right-sided centre-back, Bayern can do what I suggested United do, in that Helanio Herrera inspired system, and fluidly move between a back 3, a back 4 and a back 5 throughout different phases of play, with Coman or Sané on the right side playing the same role that Sancho would play in this sort of system for Ten Hag. Now I do think that Sancho is better when he's given less defensive responsibilities, so Ten Hag could opt to deploy him in the front line and use Anthony Elanga as a right wing back alternatively, and I actually think that Elanga could be the perfect player in the United squad to permanently convert to a wing back, and more specifically specifically to a right wing back. If we look at Elanga's FB ref report, we can see he ranks very low for every important offensive metric when compared against every other attacking midfielder. However, his defensive stats are very impressive, including his aerial duels won, interceptions, tackles and pressures. In possession, his best attributes are his ball carrying into space when United counter quickly, and he's off the ball running into attacking positions. And so I think that rather than him continuing to be a mediocre winger, if Ten Hag and the coaching staff at United can adapt his game and potentially convert him into a right wing back when needed, then these offensive attributes become a lot more valuable from that position, and his offensive output in the final third doesn't have to be as high as it has to be when he plays in one of those attacking positions in a 4-2-3-1. This is the exact type of transformation that both Victor Moses and Ashley Young went through, and it revitalised their careers. I think the same can happen with Elanga, and who knows, he's young enough where both his defensive and offensive attributes can develop significantly in the next few years, as we saw Alphonso Davies do over the course of just under a season. The primary candidates for a conversion to a hybrid winger wing-back role which I suggested for Sancho, which I guess you could refer to as a defensive winger or a complete wing-back in Football Manager terms, or even a conventional attacking wing-back role, are wingers who have the dribbling and creative ability needed to provide attacking output from the flank in the final third, but maybe don't have the goal scoring ability of an inside forward like Marcus Rashford for instance. A player who I'd like to see in this role would be Callum Hudson-Odoi, who did feature as a wing-back under Thomas Tuchel briefly, but due to the competition from Reece James in that right wing-back position, he was never really able to nail down a starting spot. But a 21-year-old Englishman has everything you would want from a complete wing-back, being a phenomenal dribbler able to motor past opposition players at pace, swerving through congested areas, and using his acceleration to burst away from defenders, which would be perfect down the right flank. He could hold his width in the attack and look to receive the ball before isolating his fullback in a 1v1. And from his FB ref report, we can see that he ranks in the 94th percentile for progressive carries, showing his ability to carry the ball forward at pace from a deep position when his side looks to counter-attack. His dribbles are only in the 67th percentile, but that can definitely improve over the next few seasons. And if we compared him to fullbacks, I'm sure he'd be at least in the late 80s, early 90s for that metric. But it's his creative metrics that are really what tell me that he could be world class from this wing back position, as he ranks in the 80th percentile for his XG assisted, meaning that even when compared against every other attacking midfielder, he ranks incredibly highly. So when converted to a wing back, he should be one of the best chance creating players in this position in world football. Another player who I do think could be converted into this role in a back five system would be Dejan Kulusevski, who could provide Antonio Conte with a potent offensive threat from the right wing back position. From his FB ref report, we can see that his defensive metrics show a player who reads the game well and has a very high level of work rate without the ball, exactly what you'd want from a wide attacker playing as a wing back. But he also ranks fairly decently for his attacking metrics, ranking in the low to mid 70s for his XG assisted and non-penalty goals. And whilst he does rank fairly averagely for his ball progression metrics, he would still be very good at progressing the ball forward from a wing-back position. His ability to curl in a dangerous in-swinging cross from the right side makes him perfectly suited to holding his width. Unlike Trent Alexander-Arnold at Liverpool, his crossing ability from the right side would be a significant attacking weapon and would also allow Antonio Conte to use two other wide attackers like Richarlison and Son alongside Kane in the same system. Other players like Bukayo Saka, Harvey Elliott and Dwight McNeil are all other players I could see being converted into this role and eventually progressing to become top level players in it. But for Manchester United specifically, I think Elanga and in particular Jadon Sancho would be the two I would mark out as players who could potentially experiment with a position change. Let me know which other players you think would suit this role, and if you like these kind of thought experiment videos, let me know your thoughts in the comments section as well and put some suggestions for future videos.